March 7, 2026. Sirens are screaming across the Galilee panhandle. Residents of Kiryat Shmona are receiving evacuation warnings from Hezbollah itself, telling them to move south. Rockets are striking open fields and hillsides across the upper Galilee. And in military hospitals as far north as Tzfat, wounded soldiers are arriving from the Lebanese border. This is not a drill. This is not a minor incident. This is Hezbollah formally reopening a war that much of the world had assumed was over. The Israeli Defense Forces confirmed it. One barrage on this day alone amounted to 40 rockets fired from Lebanese territory into northern Israel. Some were intercepted. Others struck ground. And that single barrage has sent the same urgent question echoing from Washington to Jerusalem. How did we end up here again? And how bad could this get? To understand what is happening tonight, you have to understand what broke the ceasefire. Because there was a ceasefire, it went into effect on November 27, 2024, after a brutal round of fighting that devastated Hezbollah. Israeli and American officials declared it a success. Lebanese armed forces deployed to the south, and for 15 months, the border was largely quiet. Then, on February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a massive coordinated strike campaign against Iran. Designated Operation Roaring Lion, it struck over 2,000 targets inside Iran within a matter of days, including nuclear facilities, missile sites, and Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps command infrastructure. The opening hours killed Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Iran confirmed his death on March 1st, and within hours of that confirmation, Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Qassem announced his group would respond. The era of patience, he said, had ended. Shortly after 1 a.m. on March 2nd, Hezbollah fired its first rockets at Israel since the ceasefire. Precision missiles and drones targeted a missile defense installation south of Haifa. The group called it revenge for the killing of Khamenei. By March 3rd, Hezbollah was declaring open war, and by March 7th, the Lebanese border had become one of the most active conflict zones on Earth. What makes the March 7th barrage significant is not just its size, though 40 rockets in a single volley is significant. It is what it represents within the broader trajectory of this week. By the time those rockets were fired, Hezbollah had already launched over 210 missiles and drones into Israel since the fighting began on March 2nd, according to UNIFIL monitoring data. That is roughly 60 projectiles per day across the opening days of the conflict, and the targets have expanded with every passing day. Haifa, the Upper Galilee, the Golan Heights, and on March 4th, Hezbollah fired a long-range missile all the way to Tel Aviv, its deepest strike into Israeli territory in this round of fighting. Now here is the detail that defense analysts need to sit with. 60 projectiles per day is not an impressive number by Hezbollah's historical standards. During the 2006 Lebanon War, Hezbollah averaged 117 rockets per day across 33 days, with a single-day peak of over 200 on August 2, 2006. During the fall 2024 war, Hezbollah's largest single barrage reached 230 rockets plus 20 drones in a single day by Israeli Defense Forces count. So why is Hezbollah, a group that once fired at that scale, now operating at roughly half that capacity? The answer lies in what the 2024 war actually did to this organization. The Alma Research Center estimated Hezbollah entered March 2026 with approximately 25,000 rockets and missiles. Before the 2024 conflict, the same analysts estimated the group held between 120,000 and 200,000 projectiles. That means Hezbollah lost somewhere between 75 and 80% of its pre-war arsenal during that conflict. It spent approximately $50 million per month on rearmament throughout 2025, largely funded by Iran, and it still could not replace what was destroyed. More damaging than the weapons losses were the leadership losses. Hassan Nasrallah, who commanded Hezbollah for 33 years, was killed by Israel in September 2024. His designated successor, Hashem Safiuddin, was eliminated weeks later. Senior commanders throughout the organization's military wing were systematically targeted throughout the conflict. The group that resumed fire in March 2026 was not the Hezbollah of a year earlier. It was a degraded, reorganized force operating under new leadership with a fraction of its former firepower. And yet it fired. And that decision, made by Naim Qassem in the hours after Khamenei's death, is one that analysts are now examining very carefully, because Hezbollah did not have to enter this war. The November 2024 ceasefire, whatever its violations, had given the group time and space to rebuild. The Lebanese government was moving, however cautiously, toward constraining Hezbollah's military activities. Presidential elections had ended a 2-year political vacuum, with Joseph Aoun taking office in January 2025. A new Lebanese government under Prime Minister Nawaf Salam had formed. There were real political incentives for Hezbollah to stay out of the Iran conflict, at least initially. It chose the opposite, and Israel responded with exactly the overwhelming force that military analysts had predicted it would. Within hours of the first Hezbollah rockets on March 2nd, the Israeli Defense Forces launched strikes across Lebanon, including in Beirut's Dahiyya district. By March 6th, the Lebanese Health Ministry had confirmed at least 217 people killed and 798 wounded from Israeli strikes. 95,000 people had been displaced. On March 7th itself, an Israeli Defense Forces commando raid on Nabi Chit in the Bekaa Valley resulted in clashes that killed at least 41 people and wounded 40 more, including 3 Lebanese army soldiers. On the Israeli side of the ledger, the numbers tell a different kind of story. Military casualties from Hezbollah fire across the first 6 days of this conflict include over 10 soldiers wounded, at least 5 of them seriously. On March 6th, 8 Jivadi Brigade soldiers were struck by a Hezbollah rocket near the Blue Line, 5 of them seriously, when they failed to reach shelter in time. On March 7th, 2 more soldiers were moderately wounded in a missile strike in southern Lebanon. No Israeli civilians were killed by Hezbollah rockets through this period. 1 foreign national, an Indian citizen, was killed by a Hezbollah anti-tank missile at Margaliat on March 4th. Several Israeli civilians were treated for shrapnel wounds and acute anxiety at Ziv Medical Center in Tzfat. That asymmetry in casualties matters for understanding what air defense is actually doing here. Iron Dome has been intercepting a portion of incoming rockets. The Israeli Defense Forces have not released specific interception percentages for this conflict, which is standard wartime practice. But the system is working alongside higher-tier interceptors simultaneously. Arrow 3 and David's Sling have been engaged against Iranian ballistic missiles targeting Israeli territory at the same time, meaning Israeli air defenses are being tested across 2 entirely different threat layers at once: short-range rockets from Lebanon and long-range ballistic missiles from Iran. Defense analysts have warned for years that coordinated multi-front saturation could stress this architecture in ways no single-front conflict ever would. That scenario is no longer theoretical. The Lebanese government's response to Hezbollah's decision to fight has been striking in its own right. Within days of the opening barrage, Lebanese authorities took the unprecedented step of formally banning Hezbollah's military activities and calling on the group to disarm. That is the strongest language any Lebanese government has ever directed at Hezbollah. Whether it carries practical weight in the middle of an active war is a separate question entirely. But it reflects how profoundly Hezbollah's political standing inside Lebanon has eroded since the 2024 war, and how clearly the country's new leadership understands that another full-scale conflict threatens everything Lebanon has been attempting to rebuild. For the residents of northern Israel, none of that political context changes the immediate reality. Kiryat Shmona, a city evacuated for months during the 2023 to 2024 Hezbollah pressure campaign, is again under direct rocket threat. Families who returned home in late 2024 are again receiving warnings to leave. The psychological cost of repeated displacement on communities along Israel's northern border is a dimension of this conflict that no casualty count can fully measure. What comes next is the hardest question in any rapidly escalating conflict to answer. Israel has mobilized 110,000 reservists and assembled 5 divisions near the Lebanese border. Israeli Defense Forces Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir has announced an offensive campaign against Hezbollah with all options on the table. A large ground operation into Lebanon, unthinkable 2 weeks ago, is now being discussed openly by senior Israeli officials. Hezbollah made its choice when it broke the ceasefire on March 2nd. The 40 rockets launched on March 7th are simply the latest expression of that choice, fired from an arsenal that is a fraction of what it once was, against a military simultaneously prosecuting a war against Iran. Every projectile Hezbollah expends now is one it cannot quickly replace. Every day this conflict continues without a diplomatic off-ramp is a day the argument for a deeper ground campaign grows stronger inside the cabinet in Jerusalem. The Northern Front has returned, and based on the forces now massed on both sides of the border, what happens next will not be small.